It's June 1st, 2009. Air France Flight 447, an Airbus A330, disappears over the Atlantic Ocean. 228 people vanish without a trace. No distress call, no radar contact, just silence. For years, the world was left with one haunting question. How does a modern jet, flown by experienced pilots, simply vanish from the sky? This is the story of when automation failed, and the humans behind it couldn't understand what the machine was trying to say. This is the crash of Air France Flight 447. Part 1. The flight. Flight 447 was a routine overnight service from Rio de Janeiro to Paris, carrying 216 passengers and 12 crew members aboard an Airbus A330-203. At the controls were Captain Marc Dubois, a 58-year-old veteran with over 10,000 hours of flight time, and two younger co-pilots, David Robert and Pierre-Cédric Bonin. It was a typical tropical night, warm, humid, and dotted with thunderstorms across the equatorial Atlantic. Nothing unusual for a long-haul crew. As the aircraft climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, the flight was uneventful. Passengers slept. The cabin lights dimmed. The A330's advanced automation, its autopilot and autothrust systems, were doing the work. Like most modern airliners, it could practically fly itself. But that night, the very systems designed to make flying safer would set the stage for disaster. Part 2. Into the storm. Around 1:30 a.m., the aircraft approached an area of heavy storms known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a band of towering thunderclouds stretching across the ocean. The pilots discussed their route. Radar showed clusters of storms ahead, and they decided to deviate slightly to the left. A routine avoidance maneuver. But inside those clouds lurked something far more dangerous than turbulence. Supercooled water droplets, capable of freezing almost instantly. And at high altitude, ice can be deadly. Not for the engines, but for the pitot tubes. These small metal probes measure airspeed and feed that information to the autopilot. If they ice over, they can send false readings. At 2:10 a.m., that's exactly what happened. Ice crystals began to form on all three pitot tubes. Within seconds, the autopilot, suddenly confused by inconsistent speed data, disconnected. Part 3. The start of confusion. The sudden disconnection startled the crew. The A330 reverted to alternate law, a degraded flight mode that removes some of its automatic protections. Bonin, the youngest of the three pilots, was flying manually. With the autopilot gone, the jet felt heavier, less stable. He pulled back on the side stick, raising the nose. The aircraft began to climb. But here's the problem. At high altitude, the margin between flying and stalling is razor thin. And with unreliable speed readings, the pilots couldn't tell how fast they were actually going. Within seconds, the A330's stall warning blared. Stall! Stall! The aircraft's nose was too high, and the airspeed too low. But instead of pushing forward to regain speed, Bonin continued to pull back, climbing even higher. Unaware, the plane's wings lost lift, and the jet began to fall. Part 4. The fall begins. From the cockpit voice recorder, investigators later heard chaos. The crew was disoriented. Their instruments were conflicting. The altitude kept changing rapidly. 37,000, 35,000, then 33,000 feet. As the aircraft oscillated up and down, Captain Dubois, who had been resting, rushed back to the cockpit. He was met with confusion. The two co-pilots talking over each other, alarms blaring, and no clear sense of what the aircraft was doing. Bonin insisted, "We're losing control of the airplane." Robert asked, "What's happening? I don't understand what's happening." In reality, the A330 was in a fully developed aerodynamic stall, falling through the night sky at more than 10,000 feet per minute, almost 2 miles every 60 seconds. And yet, the engines were running normally. The aircraft wasn't broken. It just wasn't flying. Part 5. The Human Factor. Here's where the tragedy becomes truly haunting. The pilots had more than enough altitude and time to recover. All they needed to do was lower the nose and let the aircraft regain speed. But they didn't. Bonin kept pulling back, possibly believing the plane was diving, not stalling. The other pilots didn't realize his control inputs were causing the nose to rise. This confusion was worsened by the Airbus design. Each pilot's side stick operates independently. There's no physical link like in older aircraft, so one pilot can pull up while the other pushes down, and neither feels the other's movement. As they struggled to interpret the instruments, the stall warning stopped sounding, not because the danger was gone, but because the airspeed had dropped so low the system couldn't even detect a stall anymore. Without that warning, they assumed things were improving. They were wrong. By the time the warning returned, it was too late. Part 6. Impact. At 2:14 a.m., just 4 minutes after the autopilot disconnected, Air France Flight 447 slammed into the Atlantic Ocean. The impact was catastrophic. The aircraft struck the water belly first, wings level, at a vertical speed of more than 10,000 feet per minute. All 228 people on board were killed instantly. For 2 years, no one knew exactly what had happened. Wreckage was scattered across the ocean floor, 13,000 feet below. It wasn't until 2011, after one of the most expensive and complex underwater searches in history, that investigators recovered the flight data and cockpit voice recordings. Only then could they piece together the final moments of Air France 447. Part 7. The Investigation. The French Bureau of Investigation, the BEA, analyzed the black boxes for months. The findings were chilling. There was no mechanical failure. The engines worked perfectly until impact. The controls responded normally. The cause was a loss of situational awareness, triggered by automation confusion and pilot training gaps. The pitot tubes had iced up, a known issue at the time, but that should have been recoverable. Instead, the pilots misread the situation, pulling the aircraft into a stall they never recognized. The BEA's final report called it a chain of events in which human factors played a decisive role. Automation, meant to assist, had left the pilots unprepared when it suddenly disappeared. They had become managers of a machine, not masters of flight. Part 8. Lessons learned. In the aftermath, Airbus redesigned the pitot tubes to prevent ice blockage. Airlines around the world updated training, emphasizing manual flying skills and high-altitude stall recovery. For years, commercial aviation had moved toward more automation, believing technology could eliminate human error. But Air France 447 proved the opposite. That technology, without understanding, can be just as dangerous. As one investigator put it, the airplane did what it was told. The humans just didn't understand what they were telling it to do. It was a sobering reminder that even the most advanced systems still rely on the humans behind them. Part 9. The Legacy. Today, Flight 447 stands as one of aviation's most important case studies. It reshaped how pilots are trained, how automation is designed, and how we think about trust between humans and machines. Every time a pilot takes manual control of an aircraft during simulator training, every time a system alert is redesigned to be clearer, a small part of that lesson comes from Air France 447. 228 lives lost, but countless lives saved in the years since. The ocean that swallowed Flight 447 now lies quiet again, but the questions it raised still echo through every cockpit. Automation makes flying safer than ever. But as long as humans fly, we must remember, machines can fail. And when they do, understanding must take over. Thank you for watching this episode of Sky Investigations. If you found this story insightful, please like, comment, and subscribe to support more aviation documentaries like this one. And remember, behind every tragedy lies a lesson, one that keeps us all flying safely.